Minutemen was an American punk rock band formed in San Pedro, California in 1980. Composed of guitarist, vocalist D.Boon, bassist, vocalist Mike Watt, and drummer George Hurley, Minutemen recorded 4 albums and 8 EPs before Boon's death in an automobile accident in December 1985. They were noted in the California punk community for a philosophy of jamming, econo, a sense of thriftiness reflected in the touring and presentation, while their eclectic and experimental attitude was instrumental in pioneering alternative rock history. Formation Minutemen began when D.Boon and Mike Watt met at age 13. Watt was walking through park in the hometown of San Pedro, California when Boon, playing a game of Army with other boys, fell out of a tree right next to him and found that his friends, one named Eskimo, must have ditched him. Both boys shared a passion for music. Boon's mother taught D to play the guitar and suggested Watt learn to play bass. At first, Watt did not know the difference between bass and standard guitars. The pair eventually started playing music together, mostly covering songs from artists they admired. In the summer of 1973, Watt and Boon formed the Bright Orange Band, with Boon's brother Joe on drums. In 1976 they discovered punk. Boon's mother died, and the Bright Orange Band disbanded shortly thereafter. The next year, the two joined a short-lived band called Starstruck. Following Starstruck's disbandment, Boon and Watt met drummer George Hurley and formed the Reactionaries with vocalist Martin Tamburovich. After the Reactionaries disbanded, Boon and Watt formed Minutemen in January 1980. Watt has said the name had nothing at all to do with the brevity of the songs, rather, it was derived partly from the fabled Minutemen militia of colonial times and partly to lampoon a right-wing reactionary group of the 1960s that went by that name. In the documentary We Jam Econo, Watt also states that the name was a play on Minute, after a month with no drummer, during which Boon and Watt wrote the first songs. The band rehearsed and played a couple of early gigs with local welder Frank Tonch on drums. The group had originally wanted George Hurley to join, but he had joined a hardcore punk band called Hey Taxi, with Michael Ealy and Spider Taylor after the Reactionaries disbanded. Tonch quit the group, citing a dislike of the audience the band initially drew, and Hurley took over as drummer in June 1980. The first live gig was as an opening band for Black Flag. Early days. Greg Ginn of Black Flag and SSD Records produced Minutemen's first 7 inches EP, Paranoid Time, which solidified their eclectic style. Like most punk bands at the time, the band sold the EP at the shows and at a few local record stores. It became a minor hit with the hardcore scene. By the first LP, 1981's The Punchline, they had found their voice and began touring non-stop around the country. They released the 3rd EP and 4th overall release entitled Bean Spill. By this time they were becoming one of the more popular bands in the underground scene around the country. Early on, the band avoided merch affectations such as guitar solos, choruses, and fade-outs. By the time of the second LP, What Makes the Man Start Fires, which gained considerable attention from the alternative and underground press, they were a part of the band's sound. Despite maintaining their experimental and punk roots, they continued the hectic touring schedule, which included the longest tour yet, a double bill with Black Flag in Europe. The long tour strengthened the place as one of the most well-known acts in the hardcore scene. In 1983 they released the 3rd LP, Buzzer Howl Under the Influence of Heat. It was one of the first hardcore albums to include a horn. Minutemen's anti-rockist eclecticism was perhaps the best exemplified on 1984's double album Double Nickels on the Dime. Though still somewhat obscure to mainstream audiences, Double Nickels has been cited as one of the more innovative and enduring albums of the 1980s American rock underground. On Double Nickels, they co-wrote some songs with other musicians, notably Henry Rollins, Chuck Dukowski, and Joe Baeza. In 1985 they released the most commercial-sounding recording, Project Mersh. Though the album sounded more mainstream, it sold poorly compared to Double Nickels, due largely to the negative reaction to such a commercial album from within the underground community. They continued touring, and by the time of the final album, Three-Way Tie, they decided to take a small break. They played the last tour with another emerging band, R.E.M. The final concert was in Charlotte, North Carolina on December 13, 1985. D.Boon's death. On December 22, 1985, Boon was killed in a van accident, putting an end to Minutemen. Watt fell into a deep depression after his friend's death, but was convinced to continue performing by Sonic Youth. This put an end to the band's plans to record a half-studio, half-live triple album with the working title Three Dudes, Six Sides, half-studio, half-live. The live tracks were to be based on the ballads that they handed out and as a way to counteract bootlegging. A year later, however, Wharton Hurley compiled various live recordings based on the ballads, which was released as Ballad Result. In addition, Richard Meltzer had sent Watt lyrics for 10 songs for an album on which he was going to collaborate. This project, eventually titled Spielgusher, was completed and released in January 2012 on Clenched Trench. After disbanding following Boon's death, Wharton Hurley originally intended to quit music altogether, but encouraged by Minutemen fan Ed Crawford, they formed Firehose in 1986 and have both formed solo projects since Minutemen disbanded. Watt has created 4 acclaimed solo albums, recorded for with now former wife Kira Russler as the duo DOS, recorded 3 others as part of the punk jazz jam band Banyan with Stephen Perkins, Nels Cline, and Money Mark Nishita, contributed on Providence off Sonic Youth's album Daydream Nation and In the Kingdom No. 19 Inches, and Bubblegum off EVOL, toured briefly as a member of Porno for Pyros in 1996 and J Mashus and The Fog in 2000 and 2001, and became the bassist for the Stooges in 2003. He founded his own label, Clenched Trench, in 2011, to release many of his own projects, including his 4th solo album Hyphenated Man. George Hurley has produced work with Vida, Mayo Thompson, and Red Crayola, further indulging the free-form and off-the-wall leanings showcased on Double Nickels. Hurley and Watt have also continued to make music together, both live and in the studio, since Firehose's splitting in 1994, starting with a track for the NORML benefit album Hempilation 2 in 1998. George Hurley and Mike Watt, on rare occasions since 2001, and usually in the Los Angeles area. George Hurley and Mike Watt, who have remained friends since Firehose's disbanding in 1994, reunite to play a set list of all Minutemen songs as a duet. They refuse to have a substitute guitarist playing late Minutemen guitarist D.Boon's parts. Instead, the songs are arranged for bass and drums. They insist that they not be billed as Minutemen, for these shows are referred to as a Minutemen reunion, as they do not want to cheapen or vampire the Minutemen name. Instead, they insist on being billed under the real names and that the advertisements state that they will be playing Minutemen songs as a duet. Quote, They were chosen by Jeff Mangum of Neutral Milk Hotel to perform one of these shows at the All Tomorrow's Parties festival that he curated in March 2012 in Minehead, England. Prior to the Minutemen duet shows, Hurley and Watt previously reunited in 1998 to record, along with Petra Haden and Stephen Perkins, a song for a NORML benefit album. Musical style. They were influenced heavily by bands such as Wire, Gang of Four, the pop group Richard Hell and Amp, the Voidoids, and the Urinals, and nearly all of their early songs had unusual structures and were less than a minute long. Even later, when Minutemen's music became slightly more conventional, the songs rarely passed the 3-minute mark. Though Minutemen were members of the hardcore punk community and were somewhat influenced by the speed, brevity, and intensity of hardcore punk, they were known for hybridizing punk rock and hardcore with various forms of music, separating them from most hardcore bands of that era. Minutemen were fans of Captain Beefheart, and echoes of his distinctive, disjointed, avant blues music can be heard in the songs, especially their early output. Through most of the career they ignored standard verse-chorus-verse song structures in favor of experimenting with musical dynamics, rhythm, and noise. Later in their career they blended in more traditional song elements they had initially avoided. They also played cover versions of classic rock songs by bands such as Creedence Clearwater Revival, Steely Dan, and Blue Oyster Cult. Boon and Watt split songwriting fairly evenly, though Watt rarely sang and Hurley even less so. Boon's songs were typically more direct and progressively political in nature, while Watt's were often abstract, self-referential spiels. Lyrics and themes would thus often veer from surreal humor, as in Bob Dylan wrote propaganda songs, and one reporter's opinion, to the frustrations of blue-collar life in California, as in the enduring "This Ain't No Picnic." While many contemporaries rarely displayed a sense of humor, Minutemen were generally more light-hearted and whimsical. One example of this can be found in the title of their album Double Nickels on the Dime, which poked fun at Sammy Hagar's "I Can't Drive 55" by implying that the Minutemen preferred to take risks with the music rather than behind the wheel of a car. Legacy. From 1999 until the show's cancellation, an instrumental portion of the Minutemen song Corona was the theme song of the MTV television show Jackass. In 2000, Watt, as administrator of the band's publishing, allowed the automaker Volvo to use the Boon instrumental Love Dance in a car ad. Boon's royalties were paid to his father, who was suffering from emphysema. Watt simply refers to the decision as a way for Boon to help his father from beyond the grave. Since 2001, Watt and Hurley have done occasional gigs, mainly in the L.A. area except for 2 December 2004 shows in England, playing Minutemen songs as a duo with no guitarist. At some of these gigs, Watt would set up one of Boon's old guitars and amps on the side of the stage where Boon used to stand. These performances, at Watt's insistence, are to be billed strictly as George Hurley and Mike Watt. They are also now involved in an improvisational music group, Unknown Instructors, with members of Saccharine Trust and Pair UBU. The group's career is chronicled in the book How a Band Could Be Your Life, a study of 13 important American underground rock groups by veteran music journalist Michael Azerrad. The title is taken from the lyrics to the Double Nickels track History Lesson, Part 2. The documentary film We Jam Econo charts the band's history through interviews with Watt, Hurley, Henry Rollins, Flea of Red Hot Chili Peppers, and other California punk rock contemporaries. The film premiered at the Warner Hurley Theater in the Minutemen's hometown of San Pedro in February 2005. The film was released on DVD in June 2006. In the spring of 2007, the documentary went into a heavy rotation cycle on various Sundance cable television channels. In 2003, Watt released his own book on Minutemen, Spiels of a Minuteman, which contains all of Watt's song lyrics from the Minutemen era as well as the tour journal he wrote during Minutemen's only European tour with Black Flag, essays by former SST co-owner Joe Carducci, Sonic Youth's Thurston Moore, Blue Oyster Cult lyricist and longtime Watt hero Richard Meltzer, and illustrations by Raymond Pettibon that had been used in all of Minutemen's album artwork. The book, released by Quebec-based publisher L'Œil de Craven, is published in English and French. In June 2015, Watt went on WTF with Marc Maron to discuss the legacy of the Minutemen. Covers and tributes. Watt has dedicated all of Firehoses' releases and his solo albums to the memory of Boon. Disciples of the Three-Way on Firehoses' final studio album Mr. Machinery Operator is about Minutemen, and The Boilermen from Watt's second solo album Contemplating the Engine Room is about Boon. Watt had guitarist Nels Cline play one of Boon's old Fender Telecaster guitars on the track. Sublime sampled Boon saying, "Punk rock change doer lives on." History Lesson Part 2, from Double Nickels as part of the song Waiting for My Ruka, from 1992's 40 Oz to Freedom. On the final track from the same album titled Thanks, all three Minutemen are mentioned. Watt repaid this salute by appearing in Sublime's video for Wrong Way in 1996. Sublime also sampled George Hurley's drum intro from It's Expected, I'm Gone for the Get Out, on the posthumous release Second Hand Smoke, as did San Diego-based indie rockers Pinback on their eponymous debut LP. The Unknown Instructors track Punk Is Whatever We Make It Be, from the first album The Way Things Work, contains interpolations by vocalist Dan McGuire of several lyrics from Double Nickels on the Dime. In 1994, Little Brother Records released the Minutemen tribute CD and LP Our Band Could Be Your Life. The CD version included 33 tracks by artists covering Minutemen songs, plus a track with a Boon interview and a live version of the Minutemen song Badges. The LP version had 23 tracks, including the interview and Minutemen items. Tribute songs have been written by several acts, including the Uggs, The Fad, and Uncle Tupelo, Bargain Music, Hot Club de Paris, Karate, Brutal Truth, Jeff Mangum, Yonder Mountain String Band and Red Hot Chili Peppers have all covered Minutemen songs. Economical practices. The group's early recordings were recorded as econo as possible. The group would book studio time after midnight at cut rates, take their own shows, practice the songs before going into the studio, record on less expensive used tape, and record the songs in the order they intended to have them on the record rather than waste time editing the master tape during the sequencing phase. In fact, contrary to standard practice even in indie rock, Minutemen sometimes saw records as a way to promote the tours, not the other way around. Minutemen toured frequently, but usually for only a few weeks at a time. They all held down day jobs. Their econo practices helped ensure that the tours were generally profitable. Several Minutemen album sleeves and covers, such as the Paranoid Time EP and What Makes the Man Start Fires LP and the Inner Gatefold jacket for Double Nickels, feature drawings by noted artist Raymond Pettibon, who was at the time associated with the SSD label. Other album covers, like On the Punchline Project, Mersh, and Three-Way Tie, featured paintings by Boon. Discography. Studio albums The Punchline, What Makes the Man Start Fires, Double Nickels on the Dime. Three-way tie, extended plays Paranoid Time, Joy, Bean Spill, Buzzer Howl Under the Influence of Heat, Tour Spiel, Project Mush, Minute Flag, Minutemen, Saccharine Trust Split, Compilations The Politics of Time, My First Bells, Ballot Result, Post-Mush, Volume 1, Post-Mush, Volume 2, Post-Mush, Volume 3, Introducing the Minutemen.